Okay, welcome to the Crypto Giant channel, where you get the latest information in terms of cryptocurrencies, specifically looking at Bitcoin, which is the biggest cryptocurrency in terms of market capitalization. Today I'm going to be looking at some articles just to lay the background why I think Bitcoin, it's very important to get involved with Bitcoin, but also the background of what made actually Satoshi Nakamoto to create Bitcoin, the value that Bitcoin brings to society. So I'll take you through a number of articles which lay a very good foundation in terms of understanding what is Bitcoin and what benefit or what value is Bitcoin bringing to the world. So the first article which I'll take you through is to look at the current statistics, to look at what the current financial system has created. If you look at this article, it talks about the global wealth inequality. And according to the global wealth database on 2018, the richest 1% own about 45% of the world's wealth. Just imagine, 1% of the population, they own close to 50% of the wealth in the entire world. So you can clearly see, this demonstrates clearly that the economy and the current financial system is benefiting a selected few. And those selected few, it's the people who achieved the first mover advantage. It's the people, it's wealth which has been passed from generation to generation, because they were the first to take initiative, and now they influence the government and through the policies to implement policies which actually favor them. So this economic system, it's working, but it's only working for a selected few. And also, if you look at more deeper into the analysis, it says about 10 men have as much wealth as many countries. So it looks at the top 10 billionaires according to Forbes list. Those 10 billionaires, the top 10 billionaires, they own more wealth than Switzerland, which is an entire country, which is Switzerland. They own more wealth than Argentina. They own more wealth than Poland. They own more wealth than Taiwan. They own more wealth than Sweden. They own more wealth than Belgium. They own more wealth than Thailand, Australia, and Norway. So 10, just imagine, 10 individuals, 10 top billionaires in the world, they own more wealth than a number of countries. So there's a huge gap between the guys who have and the guys who do not have. And if you continue looking at the statistics, deeper into the statistics, this graph shows the wealth of the world's poorest shrinks relative to the billionaire wealth. This means basically that the people who are poorer, they're getting more poor, and the wealthy are getting more richer. If you look at this analysis, it's not a good graph, guys. The guys who have are getting more, and the guys who are poor are getting more poor. So the gap between the rich and the poor, it's actually expanding, and that is due to the current financial system. And I just looked at the rand against the US dollar over a 10-year period. If you look at this graph, it clearly shows that over the 10-year period, the rand has depreciated against the dollar. And this is not a good story, because it basically means that your rand, it's buying less and less goods each and every year. And I did some calculation just to quantify exactly how much has the rand depreciated against the dollar in the past 10 years. In 2009, the rand against the US dollar to the rand was at the value of 7.41 cents. And currently, this morning, the US dollar to the rand is 15.38 cents. So if you calculate, then I've calculated the percentage in purchasing power. That's about 52%. It means that you can now buy 52% less goods for the same amount of money than what you bought 10 years back. So this is it's not great news. So the rand has drastically depreciated against the US dollar. You can buy 52% less goods than what you bought 10 years back. And some people can put an argument that that's if you are an employee, your salary hasn't been stagnant for the past 10 years. You have been receiving yearly increases at work. So I also took that into consideration because on average here in South Africa, the salary it increases. It's more or less correlated to your consumer price index. It's tied to your inflation. So on average, employees get about 5% increase. So if you look at that in terms of the 10-year period, that means the salaries on average has increased by 50%. So if you subtract the purchasing power, the depreciation of the rand against the US dollar, which is 52%, it means that the actual loss over the 2% in purchasing power or income, it's about 2%. You're still worse off than you were 10 years back. So the current financial system, it has put us in a worse position than where we were, and things doesn't look to be good going forward. Okay, and also if you are an employee, you are contributing towards a pension fund, and mostly the pension fund is invested in the Johannesburg. If you are an employee, you're probably contributing towards a pension fund, and most pensions are invested in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So I just looked at the Satrix 40, which is the top performing companies in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, just to look at the growth that the pensions have had over the 10-year period. If you look at this information, if you only started last year to work and you've contributed towards your pension fund, it means actually your pension has decreased by about 2.44%. So your money has actually dropped by about 2.44%, the money that you contributed towards your pension if it was invested on the Satrix 40. If you have been employed for 2 years and that has been invested on the JSE through the Satrix 40 indexes, it has dropped about 3.69%. If you have been employed for the past 3 years and you've contributed to your pension and that has been shares has been bought on the Satrix 40, then your pension or your money has grown by about 7.21%. If it has been invested in the past 5 years, it has grown by 11.76%, and if it has been invested for the past 10 years, it has grown about 120%. So if you take into consideration the inflation, honestly, then real growth, the people who has invested for more than 10 years have actually received a real growth. 3 years and 5 years, that there hasn't been really growth because your inflation is about 5% per annum. So actually the pension hasn't grown really. So with the current situation, it means that you are probably not going to have enough saved for your pension. So you need to start thinking outside of the current conventional systems, because looking firstly at the slide or the web page which I showed, the gap is increasing between the rich and the poor. The financial system is only benefiting a few, and if you take into consideration what Robert Kiyosaki is saying, that we need to think outside of the box. The system of going to school, getting a job, and then investing on the stock market and involving and getting yourself into mortgage, it's not going to improve the quality of life. You will probably be caught by surprise when you reach pension and find out that you don't have enough. So these are the foundation which actually drove Satoshi Nakamoto in combination with the global crisis which happened in 2008, which was formed by banks. But I also said, let me just compare this to the growth of Bitcoin. Let's look at Bitcoin, which is something outside of the current conventional system. It's an innovation which came in 2009 from Satoshi Nakamoto, which is completely changing the current financial system. If you look at Bitcoin from January 2009 to March 2010, Bitcoin basically had no value. There hadn't been any transaction which occurred, so Bitcoin had no value. It was still in infinite stages. In March 2010, Bitcoin was 0.03 cents in US dollars. So I said, then I did some calculation just to compare the growth that Bitcoin has achieved over the past years, comparing it to the current conventional system. Bitcoin in January 2009 to March 2010, it basically had no value. In July 2010, Bitcoin was about 0.08 cents to the US dollar. It was 0.58. It was about 58 cents in terms of rands. And interestingly, in 2010 in South Africa, we were a host nation for the Soccer World Cup. And there's a special instrument which we use to cheer our soccer players, which I've also bought in 2010, and that instrument is a vuvuzela. So just keep that in mind. Today the Bitcoin price is 8,200 US dollars. In terms of rands, it is 123,656 rands. That is the value of Bitcoin. So as I mentioned that in 2010, I also bought an instrument which is a vuvuzela, and I used the 30 rand to buy that instrument. So I said, if I had used that 30 rand in 2010 and not bought a vuvuzela and just bought Bitcoins, how much Bitcoins would I have bought? And I would have bought about 51.79 Bitcoins. With today's value, those Bitcoins will be about 524 US dollars, 524,723 US dollars. That would be the value of those Bitcoins. In terms of rands, that would be about 6.4 million rands. 6.4 million rands, from 58 cents in 2010 to 6.4 million rands. That's huge growth. That's about 2.1 billion % growth in Bitcoin. If you compare that to the current the current systems which we have, your stock markets in the past 10 years, it has grown about 120%. So it's uncomparable. So that's why Bitcoin is going to be big. You need to start understanding what Bitcoin is and start getting involved. This is the number one reason why Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin. And that reason was basically Satoshi Nakamoto wanted to create a trustless cash system. He wanted to create a cash system which didn't depend on certain institutions or individuals. Because in 2008, the banks, we had a massive recession, and the banks were the cause of that recession, because the Federal Reserve banks had dropped the interest rates prior to 2008. I think specifically from about the year 2000 to about 2006, they had dropped the interest rates. So the banks, a lot of people applied for mortgages because the interest rates were low, and banks gave a lot of people mortgages, loans. without doing due diligence, because it was good for them, it was going to benefit them. So they didn't do their due diligence. And because of that, it then resulted in a massive recession, because when the prices of the properties, or the demand for the properties, dropped, then the interest rate also picked up, and then a lot of people couldn't afford those mortgages. So it's created that massive depression. So he wanted to create a cash system which was trustless. But one biggest benefit for Bitcoin, it's a global currency. It's something that you can send to anyone, anywhere in the world. In a matter of minutes, they receive it and they exchange it to the currency of that country. And also the fees, the transactional fees, are very low compared to the current conventional system. And I want to demonstrate to you through an example of a billionaire, which is Mark Shuttleworth, the South African billionaire, of what he had to go through the current financial system. If you look at this Forbes article, it says it cost Mark Shuttleworth more to leave South Africa than it did to leave Earth. Mark Shuttleworth is the first African to go to space, and when he went on space, it actually costed him about $20 million. It actually costed him, after a year of training and reportedly paying about $20 million US dollars. In early 2002, Mark Shuttleworth rode to Soyuz spacecraft to spend about 8 days on the space station. So it's costed him about $20 million just to go to space. Mark Shuttleworth was relocated, and he was moving with the capital, with his cash. And then there was tax implications because of that. According to the South African law, if you take more than 750,000 Rand offshore, there's a tax levy of about 10%. If you read this article, it says the sums involved in Mark Shuttleworth's case were not only very large, but also subject to a 10% levy imposed as a condition for granting of permission to expropriate blocked assets. For privilege of moving the last of his own money out of the country, Mark Shuttleworth paid, understandably, under protest, a levy of more than 250 million rands. That was at that time about 30 million US dollars. So it costed him about 30 million US dollars, which was more, about 10 million US dollars more than what it costed him to go out of space. So it costed him a lot of money because of the tax implications. So, and I said, what if Mark Shuttleworth, this is the current conventional systems, the governments, because they have control, there's a lot of bureaucracy which is involved, and tax implication. What if Mark Shuttleworth converted his cash to Bitcoin and decided to convert and transact in Bitcoin? How much would it have costed Mark Shuttleworth? So there's a recent article of a transaction of more than 1 billion US dollar, which was transacted through Bitcoin, and this is how much the transactional fees which costed. It says the Bitcoin whale moves a cool $1 billion for a mere 700 US dollars, for a fee of 700 US dollars. Just compare that to moving 2.5 billion rands, and it costed him about 250 million rands. If you compare that to Bitcoin, only 700 US dollars. 700 US dollars for a transaction of $1 billion. So it is the cheapest way. Bitcoin is the cheapest way of sending cash across borders. There's no bureaucracy involved. There's no tax implication through government and paying of hefty prices. So that's why if you look at the growth in Bitcoin, and you understand how Bitcoin works, that the supply is dropping over the years, and the demand is increasing because people are starting to understand Bitcoin and moving away from the current traditional ways of being controlled by governments and the current financial institutions, which are putting us into slavery. If you take into consideration the stats which I shared with you, the inequality. So guys, we need to move away from systems which were not designed to benefit us. We need to move away from those systems. The numbers are out there. These things are not benefiting us. We need to please make sure that you gain more information regarding Bitcoin and start getting involved. Thank you.
You've heard about Bitcoin. Maybe you're wondering, how do I get started? You could buy Bitcoin and hope the value goes up, or you can do what other smart people have done, mine Bitcoin and pocket the results. But to do that, you need a bank of powerful servers, specialized software, lots of cheap energy to run it, and access to a mining pool. Mining Bitcoin is a lot to figure out, and learning how to set up a mining facility takes time, energy, and money. That's why there's Mining City, making Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone.